On this edition of Independent Sources, federal oversight, a call for reform at the New York City Housing Authority after bombshell revelations that they lied to federal investigators, and laying down roots, the effort to create affordable housing for the elderly who are being pushed out of their homes. The details coming up.
Independent Sources, your window to the city's ethnic and immigrant communities. Your host this week, Zyphus Lebrun.
The New York City Housing Authority, or NYCHA, has been making headlines for all the wrong reasons lately. A federal court recently called for more oversight of the authority after it was found that the organization had endangered residents for years and taught their staff how to mislead federal investigators. New York City Comptroller Scott Stringer has conducted several audits of the Housing Authority over the years and says that such oversight is long overdue. He's calling for a complete reform of the organization's management structure before the monitor can begin its work. Here he is in his own words.
We have done more audits of NYCHA than any controller in modern history. And the reason I did those audits was to shine a light on some of the outrageous problems NYCHA residents face. Our audits exposed that there were 55,000 backlog repairs. We exposed faulty inventory. We showed broken windows and lack of basic necessities for people and children in NYCHA. Our recent audit showed the fact that all the playgrounds in NYCHA were basically broken and in dangerous conditions. So with the monitor now coming in, we have an opportunity to make a difference for the people in NYCHA. They're going to oversee a $2 billion investment in NYCHA to make sure that the place gets cleaned up, that we make the necessary repairs, fix the boilers, make sure people's apartments are in good order, fix the grounds, invest in infrastructure. The monitor will oversee that. The federal government is going to watch what NYCHA does. What I've said now, though, is that the monitor will not be effective unless we change the management structure at NYCHA. Right now, we don't have best practices. We have a chair of the board and someone who's sort of the chief operating officer, the manager. And it's a conflict because there's no one really in charge. Some years, the chair is in charge. Some years, the manager's in charge. That's not a way to run a very complex agency. Also, believe it or not, major positions remain unfilled at NYCHA. There's no chief financial officer. Where's the general counsel? Position is not filled. I could talk about this for days. There's also a 7-member board. No one's sure what they do. They don't bring a particular expertise to NYCHA. So I believe that if you're going to have a monitor, if you're going to create a pot of money to fix NYCHA, then you have to reform the way NYCHA is run, the way NYCHA is managed. I think it only works is if the city hall, really is committed to creating a system, a management system, where the money is well spent, where the manager with the monitor has a real opportunity to work collaboratively. But this is all hands on deck. If we are not careful about this, we're really going to continue to jeopardize the lives of 400,000 people who live in public housing. And rather than sort of be the last in the nation on NYCHA, we should be leading in terms of ushering in the next generation of low-income housing. Because just because you may not make a lot of money doesn't mean you don't have a right to live in our city, and it doesn't mean that you should live in safe, sound conditions.
The NYCHA debacle aside, Mayor Bill De Blasio has been pushing an ambitious plan to preserve 180,000 units of existing affordable housing and to build 120,000 new ones. This at a time when there are concerns that the market for this is increasingly unfavorable following the Trump administration's changes to the tax code. I sat down with Nicholas Dagan-Bloom, a professor at the New York Institute of Technology and the co-editor of the book Affordable Housing in New York. We talked about the mayor's plan as well as the sector's future. Professor Nicholas Dagan-Bloom, thanks for being in studio today.
I'm delighted to be here.
All right, so you're here to talk a little bit about affordable housing with us. And I just want to off the bat start with your impressions. Mayor Bill De Blasio has a very ambitious plan. In your estimation, how do you think he's been doing?
By the standards they've set, the productivity level is impressive. I think there are about 30,000 new construction starts and about 60,000 some preservation of older units. So in that sense, it is, they are moving, as hoped, towards meeting some of their goals. I think that it will become more and more difficult as the years go by to identify sites to kind of create the large-scale projects that they'll need to meet those goals. So I think that's going to be an issue. I think the other big piece here is that, well, we talk about the numbers a lot, but I do think that the quality is very high, particularly of the new construction. And that's terrific. They're building beautiful new developments. Each one really goes through the whole process of approvals. They're not, in contrast, let's say, to public housing, 50, 60, 70 years ago, they're really working with neighborhoods. It's an affordable housing program, but in some ways it's also a neighborhood improvement program.
Right.
So that's terrific. And when you go see these places, there's terrific architecture firms who are working on these projects, like Magnuson and so forth. So that is great. And I also think that's going to be part of the problem which will emerge over time, because the quality is extraordinarily high of these developments, and they're often leveraged. Also, the units are often leveraged with market pieces as well, or close to market. So that also is based on the idea that there will continue to be that demand in the city for these kinds of mixed income kinds of developments, especially when you have a lot of high-end housing now, which is undersubscribed perhaps.
Right, right. Now you said that there is the first issue, you have some concern as regards to whether the city would be able to continue. What is that about? Is that a space issue you were referring to?
Well, their big push now, right, is to increase density in certain neighborhoods and, for instance, build on NYCHA land and so forth. So there's a lot of politics which have come up about those, those initiatives.
Right.
And so they have to make a lot of compromises, often costly ones, in terms of neighborhood investment or cut back on some of the density they want and so forth. So the ability to meet those goals will be premised on their, for instance, opening up a lot, being able to build these large projects on NYCHA development sites, for the rezoning they want to do to be successful, and ultimately for kind of keeping this kind of pipeline, right, of private sector developers who are either nonprofits or even for-profit developers interested in this type of housing. It's really challenging, and I give them a lot of credit for what they've pulled off under what is an extraordinarily complex and challenging environment for building new housing in New York. I mean, to build anything in New York is difficult, and then to build housing that is basically affordable to groups of people at the lower end is even more complex.
Yeah. Now, we talk about affordable housing, and there's always this effort to get housing for people on the lower end. Mayor De Blasio was rallying for 1.9 million in additional funding for folks at the lower end, the poorest of the poor, if you will. But in some cases, there are houses that still run at like $3,700 a month. I mean, is that truly affordable housing?
Well, that would be more in sort of the program as a whole, but they have delivered quite a few. There has been a push to deliver, when you're talking about the lower end of the income scale, definitely apartments under, let's say, $1,000. Those are definitely being delivered, but in order to pull that off, right, you need much deeper subsidies, and the way it works with all the affordable housing is it's layered now. Yeah. So if we go back to public housing, for instance, in that era, there were much deeper subsidies available from the state. The city even had some, but also the federal government. And they provided not only the money to basically, or the financing to basically build these places, but in time they even provided an annual operating subsidy to keep it going. And most of these programs don't provide that, right? So what has to happen is you have to kind of come up with this really interesting kind of mix, right, of funding sources to get it built, but also you have to have a kind of, when it's all done, you have to have a picture of a building, if you want to think about it, which can financially support itself through rents.
Right.
Complicated.
Right. Now, we talked about government subsidies.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's recently happened with the recent Trump tax cuts is that there are concerns that the tax cuts will lower the subsidies that are available. What's your take on that?
So there is concern because one of the major feeders for the affordable housing industry are tax breaks, which are basically embedded in new affordable housing. There is concern that if companies don't need those tax breaks, they won't invest in these housing tax credits. But I think there were enough incentives put in. From everything I understand, this particular budget cycle was actually pretty good, and there are certain things built in to help kind of cut through some of that problem. And overall, by the way, the HUD budget this year was surprisingly good.
Right.
Even for public housing.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about, this whole notion of what affordable housing was supposed to do. Historically, we understand affordable housing was supposed to allow people who perhaps lived in poverty a means to go into the middle class. Has it been able to kind of fulfill that initial goal, do you think?
You mean the long view?
Yeah,
of
the
New
long
York's-
view. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There are so many stories from public housing and affordable housing and co-op city and so forth of people who have basically leveraged a public housing or, let's say, a co-op city apartment. You think of Sonia Sotomayor. There's so many people who've leveraged that into the middle class and the upper class. It's really remarkable. It's a story that it doesn't get told as much as it should. So that's important. And what does housing provide for these families? I mean, for many families, it's a stable, safe, place to live as opposed to a shelter or doubling up and so forth in other apartments. So that's a crucial resource. There are, on the other hand, of course, there are families who have stayed in public housing and affordable housing developments for generations. And that's not necessarily against the idea also of how public housing came around or, let's say, Mitchell-Lama, the state housing, because while they were interested in social mobility, they were also interested in changing the city. So when they were done, they were knocking down, you think about the Lower East Side, they knocked down so much of it that if people were going to live there, a lot of people were going to live permanently, whether in a union-sponsored project or a public housing project. So, but they would live in higher quality housing than, let's say, the old tenements, which were rotting away. So that was the idea.
Professor, this whole notion of race and ethnicity that you just alluded to is quite interesting because, there's this whole notion of urban white flight and how it affected public housing. What role do you think that urban white flight had in the decline of public housing?
Well, I'm not sure the decline so much, but certainly both public housing, Mitchell-Lama, all these programs were based in their initial years primarily on serving white people. All right. They did become integrated in the 1940s and 50s, and then there was significant white flight from these developments. So I do think race is a major factor, and certainly when we look at the willingness of, let's say, the state government, city government, to fund, let's say, preservation of affordable housing. That's often Mitchell-Lama projects, some of which are maybe more, not all of them, are maybe more, a little bit more mixed in terms of race, whereas we look at public housing has become very minority identified, and it can be very difficult to motivate, let's say, a broader constituency, citywide, statewide, to basically, maintain the quality of that housing.
Right. Do you feel that at the end of the day that, public and affordable housing in New York City is something that can be maintained and improved upon?
Well, I think that probably we need to lower our expectations about what it can achieve. Let's talk about those 30,000 new units. We're talking about a housing, 2 million apartments in a city, right? So the ability to influence enormous sectors, it's not there, right, in this sense, right, the new construction for the city alone. I would say that New York City alone is not going to solve the New York region's affordable housing problem. That is New Jersey, Long Island, Westchester. As long as these places aren't really doing anything significant in those areas, whether it's homelessness, affordable housing, and so forth on a big scale, then basically New York City, which is maybe, depending on how you count it, less than half of the regional population, it's an enormous burden for the city to carry alone. Are there really no homeless people in these areas out there, or are they sending their homeless population to live here, right? Are there really no people in all of the service industry in the suburbs who can't benefit from housing? But what they're doing is we now see like a much more robust reverse commute. People leaving for the city to work in hospitals and nursing homes out there. So I think, I give the mayor a lot of credit for what he's doing, but ultimately, I don't think the city can solve a regional affordable housing crisis, no matter how, because the city has limited funds, ultimately.
There's one more thing that I wanted to ask that I kind of skipped over.
Sure.
One of the issues that have been coming up as regards to the building of these affordable units is this issue of construction.
Yes.
And the cost of construction is getting higher.
Yes.
How much of an issue is that right now?
Well, it's very expensive to build in New York, and these they're in the hundreds of thousands. It's not material because we want new affordable housing to be as good in some ways, maybe not as much square footage or the finishes, but we want it to be as good as market housing. Really, what makes it affordable are the subsidies, right? So it's costing a lot to build these units. I think the only way forward, probably if you really want to kind of scale up, is you have to look at mass housing solutions, which people don't like very often because they tend to be they don't tend to be as beautiful or contextual. I mean, because think about public housing. It's a mass housing solution. It's more or less the same building, the same buildings all across the city. And there's a reason for that. That control costs to a certain extent, right? It's the same plan turned different ways. You go around the city. We want things to blend in and fit in, right? That costs money. You need architects, you need builders who understand the plans, you need to fit it in the neighborhood. So we've kind of chosen a quality of life, even in new affordable housing, over volume.
Yeah. All right. Professor Nicholas Dagan Bloom, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
When we come back, preserving affordable housing for the city's elderly. Thanks for staying tuned. The New York City housing projects were once a beacon of affordable housing for millions of New Yorkers. Gary Pierre recently visited the Linden houses in East New York, Brooklyn. He spoke with longtime residents who have lived through decades of neglect and mismanagement by city officials, many of them elderly, looking to transition to senior housing.
Dorinda Pennell has lived at the Linden houses in the East New York section of Brooklyn for more than 30 years. She raised 4 children and 4 grandchildren in her 2-bedroom apartment that provided a safe and comforting environment for her family when she worked on Wall Street and later at Wyckoff Heights Hospital in Brooklyn.
For one, it was a decent place to live. It was basically financially benefit for me. I'm a single parent, so it was okay for me. Those were the best days. The doors were locked. The intercom worked. We had 1 maintenance man per building. They washed and waxed the floors. The tenants were decent. We lived as a family.
Pennell is one of the 400,000 New Yorkers who live in 328 public housing complexes across the city. These apartments were built as a stepping stone to the middle class. But over the last 2 decades, these shining examples of affordable housing for the country have descended into Exhibit A of urban blight.
As time progressed, they changed their rules with screening as far as letting people in. When I moved here, you had to have a job. They didn't allow the welfare recipients or anybody to, of that source to move in. Everybody needs a home. But when they changed it, they stopped screening, coming to the people's houses to make sure that you were living decent before they brought you in. And it's made a drastic difference in the maintenance of the building now.
Housing experts and current residents say a combination of white flight, a decrease in maintenance funding, failure to enforce rules, and lowering of application standards for incoming residents have paved the way for the current deplorable conditions at the NYCHA apartments.
Ridiculous, as she said, ridiculous.
Tawana Myers, like Pennell, raised her family here and has lived through the steady degradation of the Linden houses.
27 years ago, you couldn't step in the grass. If garbage was found with your name on it, you get a summons. After 3 or 4 summons, you'd be held to be possibly evicted. We have responsible porter workers, okay? There was relationships, and people was treated with a little respect. They knew the rules, the rights and the wrong. We have urine in the elevator, there's feces in the building is open to the public, there's homeless. A lot of people in public housing need multiple repairs.
These are just a few items on the laundry list of complaints that also include unlit stairways and easy access by non-residents into their buildings.
Can you see?
The lack of security is particularly worrisome for senior residents who are looking to live their golden years in peace and harmony.
Forget that. You have to defend yourself. You have to take care of yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because the doors are open. This is a freeway, front and back. At least once a week, we have to call the police to get somebody from sleeping on the staircases. You know, you might see them in the lobby, sleep. Some people have to take care of themselves, and that's how I live.
Mm-hmm. How do you take care of yourself?
Don't ask me that. Don't ask me that. By any means necessary. I'll leave it like that.
It's residents like Purnell that Reverend Brawley says are left particularly vulnerable under these current living conditions.
The argument that we hear from the mayor is he's done more, and it is true. He has done more than his predecessor and any other mayor in terms of an investment into public housing. But when you bring a fire hose to a 3-alarm fire, it doesn't make a difference and it doesn't matter. What we're saying is that we need leadership when it comes to the area of this crisis of housing like Mayor LaGuardia did. And right now, Bill De Blasio is no Mayor LaGuardia.
Reverend Brawley is the lead pastor at St. Paul Community Baptist Church. The church has played a pivotal role in helping to improve conditions for residents and increase senior housing in East New York. The church has also led the effort to build a senior housing center on a once vacant NYCHA parking lot, a model that Brawley would like to replicate citywide.
So we put together a plan that basically is it's a $2 billion plan over the next 4 years to build 15,000 units of senior affordable housing. Now, the reason why we're going with that particular approach is because that's the most vulnerable population, our seniors. We see our seniors sleeping on the couches of their children. We see seniors having to make vital choices every single month.
Olivia Wilkins made such a choice. She decided to move into a newer home after her 2 children moved on and she no longer needed her 2-bedroom apartment at the Linden houses. The city has been encouraging seniors like Wilkins to vacate their larger apartments to address a backlog of young families looking to move into public housing.
Oh, it's a 1-bedroom, but it's a nice, it's cozy, it's clean. We have pool courts, you know, like in a senior you need help or something like that. It's 81 units and it's like 14 units on a floor. And we have our own staff that keeps the building clean. And we have our recreation room, we have the library, we have social worker on site, and the management, we have gym.
This is Redwood Senior Living, an 81-unit brick apartment complex. The name Redwood is taken from the imposing tree that grows mostly in California. It's not easy to remove redwoods because of the way their roots interconnect, supporting each other. The redwood is the first of many such buildings that Reverend Brawley is proposing.
We believe, based on this one model that we have built, that we think can be paradigmatic for the rest of the city, that we've got members who left public housing and moved into Redwood Senior Living. They moved across the street, which means they get to go to their doctors, their hairdressers, thank God, their churches, and they're able to stay in their community that they built, and then it keeps the stability and the fabric of our communities intact and sane.
This sentiment is echoed by some of the older residents at the Linden houses who may someday have to make a similar decision to vacate larger apartments.
just like our seniors. We need to stay where we was raised at, where my doctors are, okay, where my church is, my congregation. This is one of the reasons why I stay where I'm at. And I believe there's a chance for things to change.
Even with the Redwood success, Reverend Brawley still needs to convince city officials to develop available lands near housing projects into affordable senior complexes.
There is land, NYCHA land, vacant land. I need to go back and share that. When we build these, when we're talking about building these affordable senior apartments, we're talking about underutilized parking lots, of which Redwood was built on one of them. And we're talking about these parking lots that are just basically just sitting there. The question is, if we don't build affordable senior housing, what will be built there? Private-public partnerships with greedy developers who will benefit from the land, building luxury tenements when our people right there are suffering and dying is not what we're going to accept in our community.
For Independent Sources, I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre.
As we wrap this episode, we'll also be tying a bow on Independent Sources as a series. It's been a pleasure bringing you stories from the city's often undercovered ethnic and immigrant communities. Endings are never easy, so I guess this is more of a transition as we rework the show concept a bit. We will continue to tell stories from these communities in a different format in the fall, so stay tuned for that. Till then, here's a look back at how we've kept you independent-minded.
The map helped find Joseph's baby, who she named Tamika. Joseph says that Melinda was aware of the years each plot was used and approximately how many babies were buried in a single trench between 1977 and 1981.
Steven says he bought his gun from a friend for $450.
All you think about is you, the person or persons that's about to harm you, what you think is about to harm you, and you think about the police. And that's when usually you'll just be like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and I got a minute and 58 seconds to get away.
It's these descendants and U.S.-born Afro-Latinos who are raising awareness of the divide that exists between dark-skinned Latinos who do claim their African roots and those with lighter skin complexion who don't.
And so I began call it a crusade.
A crusade that led to the passage of Ari's Law, a comprehensive New York state law controlling gun trafficking, as well as getting the Brooklyn Bridge ramp named for her son, the Ari Halberstam Memorial Ramp.
Hussein, a real estate broker, and community activist Shahid have been actively recruiting other Bangladeshis to move into the neighborhood like they did about 20 years ago. Since then, they have promoted the Bronx's lower rent as a major selling point.
This exodus eventually hit the community's pocket. Businesses closed, and landlords that once had waiting lists to rent $3,500 a month rooms couldn't give space away. Years later, the community that once boasted that it was the biggest and most vibrant Pakistani enclave in the United States has not yet fully recovered.
So for the past 2 years, the Orthodox Jews of Beis Menachem of Parkchester Synagogue have been praying under the same roof as the devout Muslims of the Masjid Al-Iman Mosque, a historical first many, including Blackman, consider miraculous.
Sedbon is a French immigrant who moved to Brooklyn more than 10 years ago with her 2 children. She felt there was something missing for French parents who wanted to put their toddlers into the American school system. So she created the Language and Laughter Studio.
We had to fit in, which was already a big challenge, but at the same time keep our custom, culture, and language alive.
When the New York City Department of Education created the small schools about 15 years ago, they had no plan or vision for how they were going to offer a high school experience to schools that had 400 students. How are they going to give them music, bands, sports, art? And so what they did is created this segregated school system where you have 70,000 students of color in a segregated high school and no league that offers them sports to play, and really still no vision for how they're going to do it.